They called the new Avenger a clumsy whale. They called the old Devastator a flying coffin. The Japanese laughed at both. But at Midway, in one suicidal charge, these planes bought 5 minutes. 5 minutes to send 4 Japanese carriers to the bottom of the Pacific. June 4th, 1942, 4:15 a.m. 200 miles northeast of Midway Atoll. The darkness is absolute, broken only by the dim red glow of instrument panels and the churning white foam of the bow wave far below. You are on the flight deck of the USS Hornet. The air is not just cold, it's a physical weight, thick with the smell of high-octane aviation fuel, hot oil, and the sharp metallic tang of the Pacific. The deck pitches and yaws in the pre-dawn swell, a tiny, man-made island of steel in an ocean of overwhelming blackness. Around you, men move like ghosts, their hushed orders barely audible over the howl of the wind and the low rumble of the carrier's engines. They are the pilots and aircrew of Torpedo Squadron 8VT-8. They gather near their machines, and the mood is not one of bravado. It is somber, tense, resigned. Their aircraft, parked in neat rows, is the Douglas TBD Devastator. Even in the dark, you can see it for what it is, a relic. The TBD is a whale of an airplane, with a corrugated metal skin that seems to belong on a barn roof. Its canopy is a long, clumsy greenhouse, and its wing switch fold up with a laborious hand crank look thin and brittle. It was a marvel in 1935. This is 1942. The pilots know its statistics like a prayer. Top speed, if you're lucky, and flying downhill, 200 miles per hour. Cruising speed, loaded with a torpedo, just over 100. To launch its fish, a TBD has to slow down even more, flying straight and level at just 100 feet off the water, exposing its belly to every anti-aircraft gun in the enemy fleet. The Japanese A6M Zero, by contrast, can climb like a rocket and dive at over 400 miles per hour. The pilots of VT-8 call the TBD the flying coffin. They are not wrong. A few hundred miles away, on Midway Atoll itself, a different machine sits on the runway. It is the brand new Grumman TBF Avenger. It is the Devastator's replacement, and it is a beast. Where the TBD is gangly, the Avenger is dense and muscular. It has a powerful new Wright Cyclone engine, a power-operated rear turret, and an internal bomb bay that carries its 2,000-pound torpedo like a hidden dagger. But it is also untested, unproven. The handful of pilots from VT-8 who were sent to Midway to fly this first detachment have barely 100 hours in the new cockpit. To the Japanese intelligence officers who have seen grainy reconnaissance photos, this new Avenger is a joke. It's huge, even bigger than the TBD. It looks clumsy, like a pregnant whale. Japanese Zero pilots, fresh from their victories at Pearl Harbor, in the Dutch East Indies, and the Indian Ocean, laugh at the reports. Their skill, their Bushido spirit, and their godlike Zeros are invincible. This new American plane is just another target, one they will happily swat from the sky. This is the morning the trap is sprung. The Japanese fleet, the mighty Kido Butai under Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, is here to seize Midway and destroy the American fleet. They believe they have surprised the Americans. They are wrong. On the Hornet, Lieutenant Commander John C. Waldron gathers his 15 TBD crews. He knows the odds. He knows his planes are obsolete. He knows of the new Avengers on Midway, and wishes he had them. But he has his orders. He looks his men in the eye. If there is only one plane left to make a final run, he says, I want that man to go in and get a hit. May God be with us all. At 6, the first Japanese bombs rain down on Midway Atoll. Nagumo's carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryuare, turning into the wind to launch their second wave. They are confident. They are supreme. The laughter from their pilots is metaphorical, but it is real. The Americans, they believe, are about to be annihilated. They have no idea what the flying coffins and the unproven beasts are about to cost them. 7 a.m. Eastern Island, Midway Atoll. The ground is still shaking. Black columns of smoke from the burning fuel dump merge with the low clouds. The Japanese bombers have just passed, leaving a landscape of fire and ruin. But the runway, pockmarked and damaged, is functional. For the men of the detached Torpedo Squadron 8, there is no time for shock. The alert sounds. The Japanese fleet has been sighted. This is it. Lieutenant Langdon K. Feebling gives the order. His 6 TBF Avengers, the only 6 in the entire Pacific theater, are already armed and fueled. These are the planes that were supposed to revolutionize naval warfare. Instead, they look like sacrificial lambs. The 6 planes claw their way into the air. The 1,700 horsepower, Wright R, 2,600 engines roar in protest as they lift their 16,000-pound bulk off the damaged strip. Inside the cockpit, 3-year-old Ensign Albert K. Bert Ernest fights his controls. He has less than 20 hours flying this machine. He is lined up on his leader, Feebling, as they form a loose gaggle and head northwest, with no fighter escort. They are the first American carrier-style planes to attack the Kido Butai this day. After 30 minutes of tense ocean-skimming flight, a voice crackles over the radio. Tally-ho! Bandits 11 o'clock high. Ernest looks up. The sky has suddenly turned black with aircraft, dozens of them. They are A6M Zeros, the Japanese Combat Air Patrol, swirling in a protective screen above their carriers. Below them, the sea is not empty. 4 of the most powerful warships on Earth, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryuare, sailing in a perfect, arrogant box formation. For the Zero pilots, this is sport. They see 6 lone, lumbering aircraft, bigger than any bomber they've seen before, heading straight for their carriers. The Japanese pilots, led by aces like Lieutenant Iyozo Fujita, peel off and dive. The laughter is real now. This isn't a battle. It's an execution. The Zeros hit the Avengers with the force of a physical impact. Their 20mm cannons, firing explosive shells, rip through the TBF's untested airframes. Lieutenant Feebling's plane is hit first. It explodes in a blossom of orange and black, disintegrating before it ever gets near a carrier. Another TBF, then another, is riddled and cartwheels into the sea. Ensign Ernest shoves his yoke forward, dropping his Avenger so low his propeller almost clips the whitecaps. Tracers, red and green, create a terrifying lattice in the air around him. The sound inside his cockpit is a deafening roar of his own engine mixed with the thwack, thwack, thwack of cannon shells striking his fuselage. His hydraulic systems are shot out. His controls go sluggish, turning to mush. In the back, his turret gunner, Radioman 3rd Class Harry Ferrier, is firing his 50 caliber machine gun, desperately trying to swat the Zeros away. Then, his gun goes silent. Ernest screams into the intercom. There is no reply. Ferrier is dead. Ernest is alone, his plane a flying wreck. He lines up on the nearest carrier, the Hiryu. He triggers his torpedo. It drops, but the plane is crippled, the system damaged. The torpedo's run is erratic. It misses. Somehow, Ernest pulls the shredded TBF into a climbing turn. His bombardier is wounded. The plane is flying on prayers and residual cable tension. He leaves the battle behind, a scene of 5 burning oil slicks where his squadron used to be. The Zeros, triumphant, climb back to their patrol altitude, reporting an easy kill. The new Avenger is a failure. When Bert Ernest crash lands his ravaged TBF back on Midway, mechanics count over 60 cannon and machine gun holes. He is the only pilot to return. 5 of the 6 Avengers are at the bottom of the sea. They scored 0 hits. The Japanese pilots are confirmed in their belief. The Americans are fools, sending obsolete, clumsy planes to their death. But this disastrous, suicidal charge did something vital. It kept the Zeros low, it kept the Japanese decks disorganized, and it was only the beginning. Now, the flying coffins were coming. 9:18 a.m., 150 miles northwest of Midway. The sky is a painful, empty blue. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, flying his TBD Devastator, is furious. He has been in the air for over 2 hours. The Hornet's main strike group, the SBD Dauntless dive bombers and their fighter escorts, followed a heading that Waldron was convinced was wrong. Against orders, he had taken his 15 TBDs of VT-8 and broken off, trusting his gut, his training, and a thin wisp of smoke he'd seen on the horizon an hour ago. He was leading his men on a hunch that they would find the Japanese fleet, or they would run out of fuel and drop into the ocean. "Attention all planes." His voice, strained, comes over the radio. "Enemy carriers sighted. Bearing 320. There they are. The Kido Butai, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. 4 white wakes cutting through the Pacific. But what Waldron sees next chills him to the AN. The sky above the carriers is black with zeros. They are the same fighters that had just butchered the Avengers from Midway, now rearmed, refueled, and waiting. Waldron's hand tightens on his stick. He knows what he is about to do. He knows his plane, the flying coffin, cannot survive. He is flying at 1,000 feet. His fighter escort is nowhere to be seen. He makes the call. "We will go in. We will attack. No matter what." On the flagship Akagi, Commander Minoru Genda, Nagumo's air officer, is stunned. A new group of American torpedo planes is approaching. Alone, with no fighters, it is incomprehensible. It is suicide. A TBD pilot, Ensign George Tex Gay, looks out his cockpit. He sees the Zeros detach from their high-altitude patrol. They aren't diving. They are falling on top of them, coming down in a lethal, vertical wave. The air explodes. The Zeros are not just attacking, they are executing. Their 20mm cannons are set for torpedo planes. They come from above and behind, where the TBD's single, flimsy, 30 caliber rear-facing gun is useless. A TBD is struck in its engine, which seizes instantly. It drops from formation. Another TBD's wing is shorn off by a burst of cannon fire, and it tumbles end over end. Waldron is first. His plane, the lead coffin, is stitched from tail to nose. It bursts into flames, and he slumps over the controls, his aircraft diving straight into the sea, dead. One by one, his squadron follows him. The Japanese pilots cannot believe their luck. It's a turkey shoot. The Americans just keep coming, flying straight and level, not jinking, not trying to escape. They are trying to get a torpedo launch. This isn't a battle. It is a massacre. In the back of Tex Gay's Devastator, his gunner is screaming, his gun firing, until a Zero's pass fills the rear cockpit with fire and metal. The gun goes silent. Gay's leg is shattered by a shell. His left hand is mangled. His torpedo release is jammed. He is flying a 9,000-pound brick of burning, perforated aluminum. He skims the waves, trying to get close to the Soryu. The water around him is churned into a white froth, not by waves, but by the sheer volume of anti-aircraft fire from the Japanese cruisers and the carrier itself. The sky is a solid wall of black flak puffs. He is hit again. The engine dies. He slams into the ocean, the impact ripping the plane apart. Gay, through sheer luck, is thrown clear with his uninflated life vest and a black seat cushion. He surfaces, gasping, in the middle of the Japanese fleet. He throws the cushion over his head to hide his white face and pretends to be debris. In 15 minutes, Torpedo Squadron 8 ceases to exist. All 15 TBDs are shot down. 30 men are dead. 0 hits. The Japanese cheer. But the moment of celebration is short. Just as the Zeros are landing, rearming, and reporting the easy victory, another alarm sounds. 10 a.m. A new contact. Torpedo Squadron 6VT 6 from the USS Enterprise. They too arrive without fighters. They too charge in. The Zeros, still low, pounce. The TBDs are torn to shreds. 10 of the 14 Devastators are destroyed. 0 hits. Then, moments later, Torpedo Squadron 3VT3 from the Yorktown arrives. This time, they have a small fighter escort, but the F4F Wildcats are overwhelmed. The TBDs go in. 10 more are shot down. 0 hits. In the span of 40 minutes, the Americans have thrown 41 TBD Devastators and 6 TBF Avengers at the Kido Butai. 37 of those planes are now at the bottom of the ocean. They have scored 0 torpedo hits. The Japanese pilots are exhausted, but triumphant. They have just proven their total supremacy. The American torpedo bombers, both the old and the new, are a joke. Admiral Nagumo gives the order to prepare the counter-strike, but in their arrogance, they missed one crucial fact. All of their Zeros, every last one, were dragged down to sea level, chasing the last of the flying coffins. They are now low on fuel and ammunition, desperately trying to land. And the sky above them, at 19,000 feet, is suddenly, fatally, empty of fighters. 10:20 a.m., 19,000 feet, above the Kido Butai. The air is thin, cold, and silent, a stark contrast to the churning hell at sea level. Lieutenant Commander C. Wade McCluskey, leading 32 SBD Dauntless dive bombers from the Enterprise, has been flying on fumes and a desperate gamble. His fuel gauges are kissing empty. He and his pilots have been searching for the Japanese fleet for hours, finding nothing but empty ocean. They were about to turn back, a failed mission, when McCluskey spotted a lone Japanese destroyer, the Arashi, speeding northeast. He made a guess the destroyer was returning to its main fleet and turned his entire squadron to follow. Now, he looks down. Through a break in the clouds, he sees it. Not one carrier, but 4, in a perfect box. And he sees something else. Far below, at wavetop level, he can see the last of the TBD, insignificant specks being chased by Zeros and shredded by flak. He sees the white foaming circles the Japanese carriers are making as they dodge torpedoes that will never reach them. On the Japanese flagship Akagi, Admiral Nagumo and his staff are breathing a sigh of relief. The last torpedo attack is over. The American effort has been costly, brave, and utterly futile. Their decks, which had been chaotic, are now being reorganized. His men are refueling and rearming their own strike Planescape and Valbomesto find and kill the American carriers. The hangar bays are a hive of activity. Fuel hoses are snaked across the decks. Bombs and torpedoes are stacked, waiting to be loaded. The Zeros that just landed are being hurriedly serviced. The Kido Butai is at its most vulnerable, a floating tinderbox. And not a single Japanese sailor is looking up. McCluskey to all planes, his voice is unnaturally calm over the radio. Follow me in. Attack. Simultaneously, as if by divine intervention, 17 more SBD, Dauntless bombers from the Yorktown, led by Lieutenant Commander Maxwell F. Leslie, arrive from a different heading. They too see the same perfect sight. 4 carriers, decks full of planes, and no fighter cover. At 10:22 a.m., Wade McCluskey rolls his SBD Dauntless onto its left wing and points its nose straight at the carrier Kaga. The SBD is not a sleek fighter, it's a workhorse. Its most defining feature is its perforated dive flaps, which deploy from the wings to slow the plane in its vertical dive, allowing the pilot to aim his single 1,000-pound bomb like a sniper. As McCluskey dives, the air begins to scream. It's a high-pitched, terrifying banshee wail, the sound of the wind rushing through those perforated flaps. For the Japanese sailors on the Kaga, it is the last sound they will ever hear. They look up, confused. The Zeros are all low. What is this? Noise. The first SBD, piloted by Lieutenant Earl Gallagher, is halfway down his 18,000-foot plunge. He is a falling speck of steel, accelerating to nearly 300 miles per hour, his entire focus on the red rising sun, painted on the Kaga's flight deck. On the Akagi, a lookout finally screams. He points, not at the planes, but at the sun, where dozens of black shapes are detaching themselves, plummeting like angry gods. The anti-aircraft guns, still pointed low from the torpedo attack, frantically try to elevate, their crews running, shouting, completely unprepared. At 10:23 a.m., McCluskey's SBD, followed by Gallagher's, pulls out of its dive. Their 1,000-pound bombs are released. The bombs hit the Kaga midship. The first punches through the flight deck and explodes in the hangar bay, which is packed with fully fueled and armed bombers. The explosion is catastrophic. It detonates the planes, which in turn detonate the bombs they are carrying, which in turn ruptures the aviation fuel lines. A secondary, massive, rolling fireball erupts, peeling the flight deck back like the lid of a tin can. Seconds later, Akagi is hit, The first bomb, dropped by Lieutenant Dick Best, strikes the center deck elevator and blasts it into the hangar bay. The second bomb slams directly into the cluster of rearming bombers on the aft deck. At 10:25 a.m., the Yorktown's SBDs, led by Leslie, do the same to the Soryu. They plaster the carrier with 3 direct hits. The Soryu is not a ship, it is an inferno. In less than 5 minutes, the laughter has stopped. The flying coffins of Torpedo Squadron 8, 6, and 3, and the sacrificed Avengers from Midway, had not died in vain. Their suicidal, hopeless charges, which scored 0 hits, had accomplished the single most important tactical victory of the battle. They had pulled the entire Japanese fighter patrol down to the water, holding them there, pinned, for the exact 5-minute window the Dauntless dive bombers needed to arrive. 3 of the 4 best carriers in the Japanese Navy Kaga, Akagi, and Soryuare now erupting in flames, their hulls turning cherry red, their crews leaping into the sea. The tide of the war in the Pacific has just turned, but one carrier remains, and she is very, very angry. 10:40 a.m. The sea is a graveyard. Tex Gay, still floating under his seat cushion, watches in disbelief as the pride of the Japanese Navy is consumed by fire. The air is thick with the stench of burning oil, paint, and human flesh. Explosions rock the ocean as torpedoes and bombs, meant for the American fleet, cook off in the blazing hangars of the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. But the battle is not over. 14 miles to the north, Rear Admiral Taemun Yamaguchi, commander of the 2nd Carrier Division, watches the apocalypse unfold from the bridge of his flagship, the Hiryu. The Hiryu, the flying dragon, had been sailing slightly ahead of the main group and was missed by the dive bombers. Yamaguchi is a different breed from Nagumo. He is aggressive, decisive, and now he is filled with a cold, samurai rage. His 3 sister carriers are gone, his men are dying, but he is alive. And he has a full deck of strike aircraft. Prepare to launch counterattack, he orders. Find the American carriers. Destroy them. He does not need to wait long. At 10:50 a.m., a scout plane from the Soryu, just before it was hit, had sent a frantic message. 1 American carrier sighted. That carrier is the USS Yorktown. She is the one whose planes, both TBDs and SBDs, had just helped cripple the Hiryu's sisters. Now, she is about to pay the price. At 11 a.m., the Hiryu's deck turns into the wind. 18 Val dive bombers, led by Lieutenant Michio Kobayashi, roar into the sky, followed by 6 escorting Zeros. They fly with a terrible purpose, following the returning American SBDs back to their mother. Just after noon, on the Yorktown, the radar plot is a sudden nightmare. Bogies, dozens of them, bearing 250, distance 30 miles. The Yorktown's Combat Air Patrol, a handful of F-4F Wildcats, turns to intercept. A desperate dogfight breaks out, but the Japanese, burning with vengeance, cannot be stopped. Kobayashi breaks through. He rolls his Val into a dive, the scream of his own plane mirroring the sound that had doomed his fleet. Totsugeki. Charge. The Yorktown's sky fills with black flak, a desperate, impenetrable wall of steel. The Vals dive straight through it. One plane, then another, is hit and explodes, but the rest come on. Kobayashi's 500-pound bomb hits the Yorktown's flight deck at 12:20 p.m. It plunges 4 decks down and explodes in the ship's uptake, snuffing out her boilers. The ship, which had survived the Coral Sea, shudders to a dead stop, smoke pouring from her funnel. 2 more bombs hit, one exploding on the flight deck, the other in the hangar, turning it into an inferno. The Yorktown is dead in the water, a sitting duck. Back on the Hiryu, Admiral Yamaguchi receives the exultant report. 1 American carrier, Yorktown class, dead, burning fiercely. He is not satisfied. 1 carrier for 3 of his own is not balance. It is an insult. Prepare the second wave, he commands. Arm the Kates with torpedoes. They will not have a carrier to land on. They will find the other American carriers. At 1:30 p.m., 10 Kate torpedo bombers, led by Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga, take off. Tomonaga himself is flying a crippled plane, its port wing tank damaged. He knows he does not have enough fuel to return. He is leading a one-way mission. On the Yorktown, her crew performs a miracle. They put out the fires, they patch the deck. In a superhuman effort, the engineers, working in scalding steam and darkness, bring the boilers back online. At 2:20 p.m., the carrier is moving, making 19 knots, a plume of white steam signaling her resurrection. At 2:42 p.m., Tomonaga's 10 Kates arrive. They see the Yorktown, underway, and mistake her for a different, undamaged carrier. The Yorktown's gunners, exhausted, throw up another wall of fire. The Kates charge in, flying low, just as the American TBDs had done hours before. They are met with the same fate. Zeros and Wildcats tear at each other, while the flak shreds the torpedo planes. Tomonaga, his plane on fire, lines up his shot. He releases his torpedo. It strikes the Yorktown midship. A second torpedo hits, ripping a 60-foot gash in her hull. The Yorktown groans, her engines dying for the last time. She lists violently to port, her fate sealed. Admiral Yamaguchi has his revenge. He has sunk 2 American carriers. Now, he prepares his third and final strike, to find and annihilate the last American carrier, which he believes is the Hornet. But the Americans, too, have been hunting. A scout plane from the crippled Yorktown had found the Hiryu. On the decks of the Enterprise and Hornet, the SBDs are rearmed, but this time, they are joined by a new group. The untested Grumman TBF Avengers, the handful of Avengers that survived the Hornet's air group, having been launched and recovered, are now being sent to do what they were built for. Their first disastrous mission from Midway was a failure. This would be their redemption. 4:45 p.m., the Eastern Pacific. The sun is beginning to dip, casting long, bloody shadows across the water. A new strike force is boring in on the Hiryu. It is a composite, haggard group, 2-4 SBD, Dauntless dive bombers. 10 of them are from the Yorktown, orphans who had landed on the Enterprise when their own ship was first hit. They are led by Lieutenant Wilmer Bill Gallagher. They are not flying for victory, they are flying for vengeance. On the bridge of the Hiryu, Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, the fighting admiral, is preparing his final triumphant blow. His hangar crews, working with frantic speed, are arming his last 5 Kate torpedo bombers and 6 Val dive bombers. He knows his position is exposed. He knows the Americans are hunting him. He does not care. He will trade his life, his ship, for the last American carrier. He scans the sky, defiant. At 5:02 p.m., one of his lookouts screams, "Enemy dive bombers, directly overhead." Yamaguchi looks up. It is 10:20 a.m. all over again. A black rain of SBDs is already in their vertical dive, the air tearing with that same ungodly shriek of their dive flaps. The Hiryu's Zeros, flying cover, are too low, too late. They are swatted aside by the SBD's escorts. The Hiryu's captain throws the helm hard over, the ship digging its stern into the water as it tries to turn. The anti-aircraft guns open up, a desperate, deafening, and useless wall of black smoke. The SBDs are too fast, too steep. Gallagher's bomb is the first. It misses, but it is a near-perfect bracket, exploding close to the bow. Then the Enterprise bombers hit. 1, 2, 3 bombs, in a perfect, lethal string, strike the Hiryu's forward flight deck. The entire front third of the deck is peeled back and hurled upward, crashing down onto the bridge. The blast kills almost everyone on the command staff. A fourth bomb, a 1,000-pounder, hits the central elevator, just as the Akagi's had. It punches through and explodes in the hangar, which is crowded with the planes being readied for the third strike. The Hiryu does not just burn, it evaporates. A column of fire and black smoke rockets thousands of feet into the air. The flying dragon is beheaded. She stops dead in the water, a floating, unrecognizable pyre. The remaining SBDs, their bomb racks empty, make a final, slow pass. They see a scene of total, apocalyptic destruction. The last of the Kido Butai is gone. In the span of one day, the 4 carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor, that had dominated the Pacific and Indian Oceans, that were the very heart of the Japanese Empire, were all at the bottom of the sea or were about to be. The laughter from the Japanese pilots, so confident that morning, is silent. Their Zeros, now out of fuel, have nowhere to land. One by one, they will ditch into the black, unforgiving ocean. The new, clumsy TBF Avenger, the flying coffin TBD Devastator, and the slow SBD Dauntless had met the invincible Japanese Navy. And in a single, brutal day, they had broken them. The TBFs had been sacrificed. The TBDs had been slaughtered. Their suicide runs had been just that. But that sacrifice, that suicidal, impossible bravery, had bought 5 minutes, and 5 minutes was all the Dauntless dive bombers needed to send 4 carriers to the bottom. The Avenger, the plane they laughed at, had its revenge, not by its own torpedoes, not on this day, but by the blood of its first crews, who, along with the heroes of the Devastator squadrons, had paid the ultimate price for the most decisive victory in American naval history. June 5th, 1942, 5 a.m. The sun rises on a different ocean. The sea is stained with oil, littered with debris, and haunted by the dead. The great Japanese armada is in full, panicked retreat. The Battle of Midway is over. Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, the fighting admiral, makes his choice. He refuses to leave the Hairyu. He ties himself to the bridge, a final act of Bushido, and goes down with his ship as his own crew scuttles it with torpedoes. Hours later, a PBY Catalina flying boat spots a lone figure in the water, clinging to a black seat cushion. Ensign George Tex Gay, the sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8's 15-plane charge, is pulled from the water, having borne witness to the entire destruction of the Kido Butai from his unique, terrifying vantage point. Ensign Albert Burt Ernest, the only Avenger pilot to return to Midway, would file his report. His story, and the shredded wreck of his TBF, proved the new plane could take an astonishing amount of punishment and keep flying. The laughter of the Zero pilots was forgotten. The TBD Devastator, the flying coffin, would never fly in a major battle again. Midway was its funeral pyre. Its sacrifice was total. And the TBF Avenger, the plane they laughed at? The plane that, on its very first combat mission, was completely annihilated with a 100% loss rate for the planes that attacked. That clumsy, unproven beast? It would go on to become the single most important torpedo bomber of the Second World War. The lessons learned from the slaughter at Midway were immediately incorporated. Tactics were changed. Fighter escorts became mandatory, but the plane itself, the Avenger, was proven to be a warrior. It was tough, durable, and lethal. The Avenger would hunt the Bismarck's sister ship, the Tirpitz. It would send the super battleships Musashi and Yamato to the bottom. It would cripple the last of the Japanese carrier fleet at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. The handful of TBFs that were present at Midway were just the vanguard. By 1944, the US Navy would have over 2,000 of them in the air. The Japanese pilots had laughed at the TBF Avenger. They laughed at the TBD Devastator. But those planes, and the men who flew them, bought 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, the entire war in the Pacific was changed. The Avenger, in its first disastrous outing, had earned its name. It had avenged Pearl Harbor, and it had avenged the brave, lost souls of Torpedo Squadron 8.